She removed her hearing aids every night before bed. Not occasionally, not sometimes, every night, according to what Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed publicly about Nancy Guthrie's documented medical routine, which means on the night of February 1st, 2026, she could not hear anything coming. Her pacemaker could not warn her. Her phone was on the nightstand. The doorbell camera was manually disconnected at 1:47 in the morning. The neighbor's Ring camera, the one with a direct view toward her property, showed no available history for that night. Every electronic system in that neighborhood was either neutralized or dark. But there was one alarm in that house that no jammer could disable. No Wi-Fi disruption could silence it. No pre-operation checklist could turn it off. A small black terrier that had lived in Nancy Guthrie's home for years, a dog that her neighbors knew well, that reacted to everything. Headlights sweeping across a dark street, a car door closing 2 houses down, movement in the desert stillness of a Tucson night at 1 o'clock in the morning. That dog was already gone before February 1st, and here is the question that no channel has fully examined. Someone watched that house across 3 separate Saturdays, January 11th, January 24th, and January 31st. Someone confirmed the routines, the layout, the vulnerability window. Someone watched long enough to map a planned operation. Did they also notice that the dog was no longer there? Because if they did, that is not just reconnaissance. That is real-time intelligence, updated information, a detail that changes the risk calculation of an operation, and the kind of detail that someone watching a house across multiple weeks would have seen change. This is not a video about the digital blackout. This is a video about the silence that existed before it, the alarm that was already gone, and what the documented evidence tells us about how carefully someone watched before February 1st. According to what investigators, behavioral analysts, and former FBI agents have confirmed through the documented record of this case, someone watched that house long enough to know. But before any analysis, any evidence, any investigative framework, we need to understand who this investigation is about. Because the moment she becomes a case number rather than a person, we lose the most important thing about this entire video. Nancy Long Guthrie was born on January 27, 1942, according to public records and family statements. She turned 84 years old 4 days before she disappeared. She raised 3 children in Arizona over more than 5 decades, Annie, Savannah, and Cameron, after her husband Charles died in 1988. She stayed in Tucson. She built a life in a house she had called home for more than 50 years. According to what Sheriff Chris Nanos described publicly, she was sharp as a tack, no cognitive impairment, fully present. But physically, Nancy had significant limitations. According to what Nanos confirmed, she could not walk 50 yards unassisted. She depended on daily medication. She wore hearing aids. When she removed them at night, she was completely deaf to the world around her. She had a small black terrier. Neighbors knew that dog. According to what Jeff Lamian, who lived 4 doors down, confirmed publicly on the Surviving the Survivor podcast, they saw it regularly in her front yard trotting alongside her. It reacted to everything, and then it was gone. According to what Lamy confirmed directly, the dog had passed away before February 1st, 2026. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. As of March 22, 2026, day 50, no arrest has been made. No suspect has been publicly named. The reward stands at over $1.2 million. Before we examine what the absence of that dog means to this investigation, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell right now. Here at The Silenced Case, we do not speculate. We examine the documented evidence, the confirmed official statements, and the investigative patterns that experienced law enforcement recognizes, even when the public hasn't yet caught up with what the evidence is actually showing. New investigations and case updates every week. If you think the digital blackout on the night of February 1st was the most important silence in this case, watch this video first, then decide. Hit the like button and tell me in the comments. Do you think whoever planned this operation knew Nancy's dog had died? And if so, when do you think they found out? The dog that lived in Nancy Guthrie's home was not a guard dog in any formal sense. It was a small black terrier. It weighed at most a few kilograms. It could not stop anyone from entering a house. But this is not about physical deterrence. This is about what a small terrier does automatically, involuntarily, and without any instruction, regardless of signal jamming, regardless of Wi-Fi disruption, regardless of any electronic countermeasure on Earth. It barks. To understand why that matters, you need to understand what experienced residential security professionals and law enforcement know about dogs in a targeted operation. Not what criminals assume, but what the documented behavioral record of thousands of cases actually shows. A dog that reacts to headlights, to car doors, to desert movement at 1 o'clock in the morning is not an obstacle that can be planned around electronically. It cannot be neutralized remotely. It cannot be disabled from outside the property. Its absence must be confirmed before any operation begins, because an unexpected bark at the wrong moment does not just attract attention. According to the documented professional assessment of this specific case, it makes the bad guy get back in his car and drive away. According to what retired Lieutenant Bob Krigier of the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the same department leading this investigation alongside the FBI, stated publicly on the Surviving the Survivor podcast, having a yapping dog or a strong barking dog is going to draw attention. It is going to make the bad guy feel uncomfortable. And uncomfortable people are more likely to get back in their car and drive away. That is not sentiment. That is tactical behavioral analysis from someone who spent his career with the agency currently searching for Nancy Guthrie. Think about what that means specifically for this operation. A terrier barking inside a house at 1 o'clock in the morning carries through the desert stillness of the Catalina foothills with clarity. Jeff Lamy, 4 doors down, might have heard it. Other neighbors might have heard it. Lights might have come on. Someone might have looked outside. But Nancy's hearing aids were on the nightstand, and the pacemaker could not alert her. And the only real-time analog alarm that would have operated regardless of what else happened that night was already gone. According to what Krigier was asked directly, could a small terrier have changed the outcome of this case? His documented response, I don't think that's a ridiculous notion at all. And that silence, the silence inside that house before any camera went dark, is the anchor of this investigation, because the dog was already gone. And that is when this investigation stops being about the digital blackout and starts being about something that preceded it. This is not about 3 Saturdays. This is about what changes between them. According to what the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed publicly and what investigators have specifically asked neighbors about, reconnaissance of Nancy Guthrie's home was documented across 3 dates, January 11th, January 24th, January 31st. All 3 are Saturdays. To understand why that matters, you need to understand what experienced investigators know about confirmatory surveillance, not what the public assumes, but what the behavioral record of targeted operations actually shows. Exploratory surveillance discovers information. Confirmatory surveillance verifies it. The difference is critical. Someone conducting exploratory surveillance is still building the picture. Someone conducting confirmatory surveillance already has the picture and is checking to make sure nothing has changed. According to what former FBI profiler Jim Clemente assessed publicly in his behavioral analysis of this case, the level of prior knowledge required to execute this operation is not consistent with someone discovering information for the first time across 3 visits. It is consistent with someone who already had a significant operational intelligence base and was using the visits to confirm it was still accurate. That word, accurate, is the one that matters here, because accuracy requires updates. And an updated assessment of this household between January 11th and January 31st would have captured one specific change. The front yard that had previously contained a small terrier no longer did. Property records do not list pets. Satellite imagery does not log the presence or absence of a terrier. But a person conducting physical surveillance of a home across multiple Saturday visits Someone close enough to observe the front yard on multiple evenings would notice over time whether a small dog that had regularly appeared outdoors was still there. And here is what that means operationally. A change in the security profile of a target property is precisely what confirmatory surveillance is designed to detect. The operation was not executed on January 11th. It was not executed on January 24th. It was executed on February 1st, after 3 confirmatory visits, and after a specific change in the household security environment had either been observed or confirmed. That silence connects directly to the 1:47 in the morning when the doorbell camera went dark. While everything inside Nancy Guthrie's home was silent, something outside it was not. According to what NBC News documented and multiple neighbors confirmed publicly, on the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared, a neighbor's dog woke up. This neighbor's home had a direct line of sight toward Nancy's property. The neighbor had 4 Ring cameras, 3 recorded normally throughout the night. The fourth, the one positioned with a view toward Nancy's home, showed no available history for the blackout window, and in that same household, during that same 41 minutes, the dog woke up. Its owners described the behavior as uncanny. According to what they told NBC News directly, that's really weird, isn't it? The dog had never behaved this way before. It woke them. It demanded to go outside. It exhibited what behavioral analysis describes as a sustained, goal-directed response, not a brief startle, but a persistent reaction to something that remained present long enough to maintain the animal's heightened state. And here is why that distinction matters forensically. A reflexive animal response, a brief startle at a car passing outside, is neurologically quick and self-terminating. A dog that wakes, persists, and directs its owner toward the door is responding to a sustained stimulus, something that remained present, detectable, and sufficiently unusual to maintain the animal's alertness through the entire window. That is data. According to what former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, who spent 25 years investigating kidnappings and violent crimes, stated publicly, unusual animal behavior is one of the sensory anomalies investigators are trained to document in a thorough neighborhood canvass. A dog barking unusually at 2 o'clock or 2:30 in the morning. Each of these is forensic data. She mentioned the dog first, and she called the March 5th canvass, conducted 33 days after the crime, a redo rather than a follow-up. According to her specific documented language, a redo happens when investigators return to collect data that should have been collected the first time around. Did investigators document the direction the neighbor's dog faced when it went outside? Did they record whether it vocalized and at what intensity? Did they capture whether it tracked toward a specific direction? Combined with the disruption zone mapped from the internet outage reports, a dog's directional response during the blackout window could indicate the path of approach and the path of departure. That behavioral record has not been publicly presented as part of the investigative findings. But here is the specific detail that connects the neighbor's dog to the silence inside Nancy's house. Someone planned for the cameras, someone planned for the Wi-Fi, someone planned for the doorbell to be dark before they arrived at the front door. No one planned for the dog 3 houses away, because the only dog that was part of any operational calculation, the only alarm that needed to be accounted for, was the one inside Nancy's home, and that one was already gone. On the night of February 1st, 2026, every major data stream from the Catalina Foothills neighborhood registered its anomaly between 1:47 and 2:28 in the morning. According to what the Pima County Sheriff's Department and CBS News both confirmed, the doorbell camera at Nancy's front entrance was manually disconnected at 1:47, not a glitch, not a power surge. Someone physically tampered with the device. According to what multiple residents confirmed to NBC News, internet service was disrupted across multiple homes during the same window. According to what the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed separately, investigators were examining a damaged utility box near Nancy's home as part of the investigation. This is not about random connectivity issues. This is about a targeted, layered digital disruption, cameras, Wi-Fi, infrastructure, executed with the specificity of someone who had mapped the surveillance architecture of that block in advance. And yet, for all the sophistication of that digital disruption, there was a gap, not a technical gap, not a signal gap, an analog gap. The digital blackout addressed every electronic alarm system in that neighborhood. It could not address a small black terrier. It cannot jam a dog. It cannot disrupt an animal's sensory response. The dog inside Nancy's home was the one alarm that all the operational planning could not neutralize electronically, and it was already gone. That gap between the sophisticated digital disruption and the analog alarm that was never there to be disrupted is the most precise evidence in this case of what someone knew before February 1st. Step back from the individual details. I'll look at the complete vulnerability profile of Nancy Guthrie on the night of February 1st, her hearing aids on the nightstand. She could not hear anything coming. Her pacemaker Bluetooth severed at 2:28 in the morning, documented to the minute, capable of alerting no one inside the house. Her physical mobility severely limited. She could not walk 50 yards unassisted. Whoever took her had to carry her, requiring planning, physical capacity, and at minimum 2 people. The doorbell camera manually disconnected at 1:47. The neighbor's Ring camera facing her property showing no available history, not a system failure, a targeted gap. Internet service disrupted across multiple homes, a damaged utility box near the property under investigation, and the small black terrier that had lived in her house for years, a visible, irregular presence in that front yard, already gone. This is not a profile that assembles randomly. This is a profile that someone assessed. According to what former FBI behavioral analysis experts have documented publicly about targeted abduction operations, the vulnerability profile of a target is evaluated before execution. Physical limitations, medical dependencies, alarm systems, animals, all of it. According to what Robin Dreek, former FBI counterintelligence behavioral analysis chief, stated publicly, the zero hesitation response, the zero startle response, of the person who appeared at 1:52 in the morning is consistent with someone who had been at that door before. Someone at least 1 degree of separation from Nancy Guthrie. Someone whose familiarity with that property was operational, not casual. Someone who knew the layout. Someone who knew the routine. Someone who watched long enough to know what changed. That is the silence this video is about. Not just the cameras going dark. Not just the Wi-Fi dropping. The silence that came from someone knowing before February 1st that every alarm in that house was already neutralized, electronic and analog alike. 3 Saturdays, January 11th, January 24th, January 31st. Between the first Saturday and the last, something changed inside Nancy Guthrie's household. The terrier that neighbors saw regularly in her front yard was no longer there. The question the documented evidence demands be asked is when. If the dog was alive on January 11th and gone by January 24th, someone conducting surveillance across those visits would have observed the transition. First Saturday, dog present. Second Saturday, no dog. That is a change in the security profile of the target property. And according to what the investigative framework of confirmatory surveillance establishes, that change is exactly what multi-visit reconnaissance is designed to capture. If the dog was still alive on January 24th and gone by January 31st, the same logic applies. The final confirmation visit, the one immediately preceding the operation, would have confirmed the absence. Final verification of a changed security environment before execution. This is not speculation framed as fact. This is the operational logic of targeted surveillance applied to a specific documented reality. The dog was gone before February 1st. CN 3 visits across 3 weeks gave someone ample opportunity to observe that it was gone. The current condition on February 1st included one specific change from whatever baseline had been established earlier. The front yard was silent, and that silence, according to everything the documented evidence of this investigation shows, was the operational condition that someone had been watching for. Before the framework's analysis, I want to address something that came up in the comments from previous videos. Multiple viewers identified something that deserved direct examination. One noted, "Everyone is focused on what the suspect brought with him. Nobody is asking what was already missing when he arrived." Another wrote, "The dog didn't bark, but nobody asks why." These are not casual observations. They are the kind of analytical thinking that experienced investigators apply. Here is what the documented record actually shows. According to what Jeff Lamy confirmed publicly on the Surviving the Survivor podcast, the dog had passed away before February 1st. The specific date has not been publicly confirmed. The investigative significance of that date, whether it falls before or after the January 11th reconnaissance, has not been publicly addressed. That is an open question in the documented record, one the investigation has not publicly resolved. What the evidence does establish is this: the dog was gone. The household had lost its primary analog early warning system, and the surveillance that preceded the operation had sufficient visits across sufficient time to observe that change. In the comments this week, at what point in the 3-Saturday timeline do you think the dog died? And does that timing change what you think about how carefully this operation was planned? The documented record of this case demands 3 investigative frameworks. Each one must account for a single requirement: the silence inside Nancy Guthrie's home on the night of February 1st, and specifically whether that silence was known in advance. Because the silence was not negotiable, it was the operational foundation of everything that followed. Framework 1. The coincidence. The dog died, and the timing was unrelated. This framework proposes that the dog's death was a coincidence. It occurred within the surveillance window but was not noted, not factored, and did not influence the operational planning. Whoever executed this operation arrived on a night when the household happened to be without its primary analog alarm. This framework accounts for the digital planning, the camera targeting, the Wi-Fi disruption, the coordination between at least 2 people. All of that is documented and consistent with this framework, but it struggles with the confirmatory nature of the 3 Saturday visits. Accepting this framework requires accepting that the surveillance was highly selective, thorough enough to plan a coordinated multi-person operation, yet somehow insufficient to capture a visible change in the household's front yard across 3 separate visits. According to what former FBI profiler Jim Clemente assessed publicly, the operational intelligence required to execute this abduction came from sustained, purposeful watching. Sustained watching captures changes. Framework 2. The known absence. The dog was gone and someone planned around it. This framework proposes that the absence of the dog was observed, noted, and factored into the risk assessment, contributing to the decision to execute when the operation was executed, rather than earlier. This framework explains the timing. The operation was not executed on January 11th. It was not executed on January 24th. It was executed on February 1st, after 3 confirmatory visits, and after a specific change in the household's security environment had been verified. It also explains the operational confidence. According to what Robin Dreek assessed publicly, the zero startle response of the person at the front door at 1:52 in the morning is the behavioral signature of someone operating in a space they already knew. A person who arrived knowing the analog early warning system was gone would arrive with greater confidence than a person who did not know. But it struggles with one question the evidence does not yet resolve. If the dog's absence was an explicit factor in the operational planning, that level of surveillance awareness points toward either extensive experience in planned abduction operations or someone with specific, intimate knowledge of this household's daily life. The evidence does not yet clearly distinguish between those 2 possibilities. See Framework 3, the insider knowledge, someone within Nancy's world. Already knew this framework proposes something more specific, not that the dog's death was observed from a distance across surveillance visits, but that someone within Nancy Guthrie's social or service circle already knew because they were present when it happened, or because they had the kind of daily proximity to her life that meant the information was simply available to them. This framework explains the digital targeting most convincingly. The cameras were targeted with precision. The doorbell was manually disconnected. The neighbor's Ring camera, the one with a direct view, was within the disruption zone. This level of specificity is consistent with someone whose knowledge of the property came not from watching it from outside, but from having been inside it. According to what former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer stated publicly as her primary working theory, my number one belief is that people with some tangential connection to the household exposed insider knowledge to criminals, a housekeeper, a pool handler, a maintenance worker, someone whose functional connection to that household meant they knew which door the cameras did not cover and knew without any surveillance visit that the dog that used to be in the front yard was no longer there. But this framework struggles with the 3 Saturday surveillance visits. If insider knowledge was already available, why conduct 3 separate visits across 3 weeks? One possible explanation, and only one. The insider knowledge provided the target intelligence, while the Saturday visits confirmed that conditions on the ground matched what the insider had described. 2 separate sources, 2 separate forms of verification. Each of these 3 frameworks shares one requirement. They all demand, as a prerequisite, that the absence of the primary analog alarm in Nancy Guthrie's home was not an obstacle on February 1, 2026. The frameworks differ on whether that absence was observed from outside, planned for explicitly, or known from within Nancy's world. But they all require that the silence inside that house was complete, and on the night of February 1st, it was. Step back from the individual elements. Look at the complete silence that surrounded Nancy Guthrie on the night of February 1st. Are her hearing aids on the nightstand? She could not hear anything coming. Her pacemaker Bluetooth severed at exactly 2:28 in the morning, documented but incapable of alerting anyone inside the house. The doorbell camera manually disconnected at 1:47, not a glitch, confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff's Department and CBS News. The neighbor's Ring camera showing no available history for the blackout window, not a system failure. A targeted gap, internet service disrupted across multiple homes, confirmed by multiple residents to NBC News. A damaged utility box near the property, confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff's Department as part of the investigation. The neighbor's dog waking up for the first time its owners could ever remember, during the exact 41-minute window when everything else went dark. And a small black terrier that had lived in Nancy Guthrie's home for years, that had been a regular presence in her front yard, that reacted to everything, already gone. Every one of these elements is documented. Every one of them is inconsistent with an unplanned, opportunistic crime. Every one of them is consistent with an operation that assessed the vulnerability profile of this specific household and found it, at the specific moment of execution, to be without its primary analog early warning system. The question is not whether someone knew the dog was gone. The question is how they knew. And the answer to that question narrows this investigation in ways the documented record has not yet fully explored publicly. When you place all of this evidence side by side, according to what the documented record shows, the picture that forms is not consistent with a stranger crime. It is consistent with something else. The profile that these evidence elements construct is of someone with knowledge, specific, operational, updated knowledge that required either sustained external watching or access from inside Nancy's world. The kind of knowledge that registered a small terrier in the front yard across the first surveillance visits, and registered its absence by the time the operation was executed. According to what Robin Dreek confirmed publicly, the behavioral signature of the person at the front door at 1:52 in the morning is the signature of someone who had been at that door before. Someone operating in a space they knew was safe to approach. Safe because the cameras were dark. Safe because the Wi-Fi was disrupted. Safe because the hearing aids were on the nightstand. And safe because the one alarm that none of those precautions could substitute for was already gone. And it all comes back to the silence. Because the silence inside Nancy Guthrie's home did not begin at 1:47 in the morning when the doorbell camera went dark. It began when a small black terrier that had lived in her house for years stopped being there. Someone watched that house long enough to know. That is the documented evidence. I.e., that is the investigative question this case has not yet publicly answered. As of March 22, 2026, day 50, according to official sources, the investigation remains active, classified as a rescue operation, according to the Pima County Sheriff's Department's last public statement. No arrest has been made, no suspect has been publicly named. The combined reward stands at over $1.2 million, $1 million from the Guthrie family and $100,000 from the FBI, according to the official FBI announcement. According to what Fox News reported, citing investigative sources, the FBI recovered new photos from all 3 cameras on Nancy's property. The photos do not show anything considered suspicious. The FBI has no plans to release them. According to what the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed, cadaver dogs are no longer being used in the search for Nancy Guthrie. According to what Cece Moore, the principal genealogy investigator at Parabon Nanolabs, who has helped resolve more than 300 cases, stated publicly, "I would still go back and reswab parts of that house and look for even a rootless hair. The technology now can solve these cases with just a rootless hair." The DNA from the Florida laboratory remains under analysis. FBI tip line, 1-800-CALL-FBI. Pima County Sheriff's Department, 520-351-4900. Anonymous tips, 88-CRIME. Sheriff Chris Nanos is facing a recall effort. According to confirmed reporting, organizers must gather 120,000 signatures within 120 days to trigger a recall election. Sally Ann Farina, 68 years old, remains missing in Pima County after disappearing on March 19th, approximately 3 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has not officially connected the 2 cases. 50 days have passed since Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona. 50 days of forensic analysis, 50 days of door-to-door canvass, 50 days of tip lines and billboards and genealogy research running against DNA samples in a laboratory in Florida. But the silence inside that house, the silence that made what happened on February 1st possible, began before any of that. It began when a small black terrier that had lived in Nancy's home for years stopped being there. And somewhere in the documented record of who watched that house, and when, and what they saw change between January 11th and February 1st, that silence has a witness. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home, her family deserves answers, and the evidence, according to everything it has shown us, is still pointing somewhere specific. The investigation continues. This investigation has been presented with complete respect for Nancy Guthrie and her family. Every analysis presented here is grounded in official law enforcement statements, court documents, and verified reporting from national news organizations, including NBC News, CBS News, Fox News Digital, NewsNation, Parade, and the Surviving the Survivor podcast, where named investigators spoke publicly on record. Expert assessments are attributed to named professionals speaking publicly in their own capacity. The frameworks presented are investigative tools, not conclusions about any individual's guilt. No individual has been named as a suspect by law enforcement, and the presumption of innocence applies to every person referenced in this video who has not been charged with a crime. The Guthrie family has been officially cleared by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. If this investigation moved you, subscribe to the Silenced case. Hit that notification bell. Because here we do not speculate. We examine what the evidence actually shows, and in this case, the evidence was never meant to be found. The Silenced case. Where documented evidence reveals what someone decided you shouldn't know,